So I'm here today to talk to you about the essentials of mobile market research. Now, for those of you who have a copy of the Answers to Contemporary Market Research question book, you will very astutely know that there isn't a chapter on mobile market research in that book at the moment. And the very good news is the 2014 update of the book will include a chapter on mobile market research. And what I'd like to do today is just to share with you some of the themes, some of the answers, and some of the questions that we've been putting into that chapter, and ask really for your feedback. There is a draft version of this chapter that you can download from the NewMR website, and we'll be tweeting and providing a link at the end of this webinar that you can use. You can go and download a Word copy. What we'd really like you to do is think about what you hear today, read that chapter, and get back to us with your thoughts, your ideas. If there's a question that you have about mobile market research that's not in that chapter, please let us know. If you read a question and think, yes, that's a question I have, and you look at the answer and you think, doesn't quite answer my question, or I'd like a little bit more clarification or a little bit more detail around that, this is your opportunity to let us know that so that we can make that chapter as useful as it possibly can be for you, the readers of that chapter. So one of the first questions that we often hear people asking about online research and online mobile research: should all online research be designed as mobile friendly? Well, the general answer to that is yes. There's a trend in market research towards allowing participants to decide how they would like to take part in our studies, which devices they would like to use to participate. So generally, please try and design your online research to be mobile friendly. However, there are some exceptions to that. Sometimes a mobile device is simply not suitable for your project. Now, what's an example of that? Maybe your project requires a really large screen. Maybe it requires high bandwidth. So it simply might not be suitable. So if it isn't suitable, you really should have instructions to people that let them know that it isn't suitable to complete your survey on a mobile device, and you should have your software configured to detect what type of device is coming in, and you should have decided what sort of action you would like to take if somebody tries to do it on a mobile device. What are feature phones and how are they used in mobile research? A feature phone is a label that tends to be used for any phone that isn't a smartphone. Now what this does is creates a massive variation in the attributes that feature phones have. Some feature phones are very, very basic. They may not even have a camera, and they may not have any form of internet access. At the other end of the spectrum, we can have feature phones that are as feature-rich as smartphones. They'll have large screens and internet access, but they just simply don't fit into the current market definition of what a smartphone is. Now, the smartphone itself keeps evolving and improving and the definition changing, which also means that today's smartphone may well be tomorrow's feature phone. It is important to keep in mind, though, when researchers talk about using a feature phone for research, they often mean relying on SMS only, or failing that, on very, very simple internet access, such as that's provided by WAP. Another really important question is, when should I conduct mobile-only mode research? Now, studies should be mobile-only when this is the most appropriate way to conduct them. For example, mobile-only is great when the research needs to be conducted in the moment. For example, when participants are taking part in surveys that need to be triggered by location, time, or activity. Mobile only is also appropriate when the device is used for passive data collection. For example, when we're tracking a participant's location. Mobile is the mode of choice when the study uses features that are not usually found on a PC, when we're needing to use a camera to take photos on the move, or when we're recording action videos. And mobile, of course, is an obvious choice in countries where CADI, Face-to-face and internet are all too expensive, slow, or not even possible. This tends to occur when we're conducting research in developing markets, and often this is when we're using feature phones. What are the key uses of mobile in qualitative research? Mobile devices are used in a variety of ways in qualitative research. Some of the uses can be as simple as arranging meetings, finding locations, and often in the case of tablets, we use them to provide stimulus material. Some of the main uses of mobile for qualitative research at the moment are to help collect or aid in the collection of diaries, to enlist participants to collect data about their lives and the lives of people around them, and also as a method of connecting to insight communities, although of course this could include both qualitative and quantitative research. What do I need to think about when designing mobile surveys? There are a number of key issues that you need to think about when designing a mobile survey. One of the first things to think about is what sort of device is being used. Is it a feature phone, or a smartphone, or a tablet? Each type of device has its own limitations and its own possibilities. You'll need to think about screen size. Mobile surveys need to utilize the screen very efficiently. We need to try and minimize scrolling and to try and avoid horizontal scrolling. Please consider your participants' dexterity. Small boxes are hard to click on a touch screen, so try to make your targets as large as possible and to minimize the effort required to enter the information. You'll need to remember survey length. The general consensus is that mobile surveys should be shorter than has become the norm for online surveys. Recommendations vary from 5 minutes to 15 minutes. Internet coverage is also important. If the survey you're running requires a connection to the internet, then you should consider the sort of connection that participants are likely to have when they're operating on a mobile device. And you also need to think about design optimization. You should try to maximize the use of the features of the mobile device while still ensuring that usability is good. Think about ensuring that the items that need to be clicked or dragged are large enough, and again, it's always good to avoid horizontal scrolling. What is a research app and when are they used? An app, or a mobile application, is a piece of software that is downloaded onto a mobile device. In market research, apps can be used for a variety of purposes. These include things like surveys, passive data collection, and also qualitative research. Some apps are freestanding, which means they don't require the internet to be available all the time, and some are based on connecting to the internet when they're in use. Apps have a number of advantages. As I mentioned, some apps don't require the internet to be available all the time. So this means that you conduct research when it's needed, and that can be in the absence of an internet connection, and the results can be sent back to a server later. Apps can also be used to trigger an action. This can be via the mobile device itself or by an external signal. So the user doesn't have to initiate an action. An app can be programmed to use GPS tracking, for example, to initiate a survey when someone visits a specific location. For example, this could be when they enter a specific shop. Apps can also access the sensors and features of the mobile phone itself. We can use these to collect information about phone usage, location, and the broader environment. Apps are also often used to issue reminders or notifications. The app can remind or trigger a response from the participant. There are currently two key drawbacks to using apps in mobile research. The first of these is that the app has to be downloaded. You have to persuade the participant to download the app, and that in itself can be a challenge. And even when they're willing to download the app, there can be issues with them having the knowledge of how to do this. And secondly, Apps have to be written for each operating system, and this can be both a financial and logistic challenge. And inevitably, operating systems will change and evolve, and therefore apps will need to be kept up to date. What is passive data collection? Passive data collection refers to collecting information without the research participant having to do anything, other than, of course, consenting to take part in the process. For example, we can use an app to record the location of a participant every time they make a call or use the internet from their mobile device. This data collection carries on once started without the participant having to do anything. One of the key benefits of passive data collection is that it can be more accurate than data entered by the participant, as it does not rely on memory or on focus. How is geolocation being used in mobile research? Geolocation is a term that is used to cover a range of techniques that utilize the features of the phone to locate it geographically. The location of the phone can be used in a variety of ways, but there are two key ways it is being used at the moment. Firstly, it's used to track where the person with the phone is. Now, this can either be on a macro scale, where we might track somebody leaving home, going to work, and then going on to the shops afterwards, or on a much more micro scale, where we might like to interrogate which fixture in the store did a particular participant visit. And a second way that geolocation is being used is to cause a research action to be triggered. An example of this is if we know that a participant is about to approach a retail store or leave a retail store, we can ask them to complete a survey as they're doing that. Geolocation can use a variety of approaches. These can be things like GPS, cell tower location, or short-range communication. To use GPS requires that the device has GPS and that it has it enabled, and the participant needs to have a line of sight to at least 3 satellites. Now, this usually means that the participant needs to be outside. To use cell tower location requires the cooperation of mobile phone providers and locates the phone using the mobile phone service. Short-range communications can vary from things like Wi-Fi to Bluetooth and near-field communications, or NFC. With the appropriate hardware, these short-distance approaches can track participants indoors. And there are also a whole range of other technologies being investigated at the moment, and things like sound frequency recognition and others. One of the main limitations of geolocation is that it tends to require an app. And we've talked a little bit earlier about some of the limitations of people having to download an app to be able to take part in research. What are the key legal and ethical issues for mobile research? Well, the key issues around mobile research at the moment tend to relate to informed consent, as they do for most forms of research. However, as with any new form of research, mobile gives a new context to the issue of informed consent and raises a number of questions. Things that you need to think about are, does the participant understand what information they are sharing when they have agreed to take part in the research? And this is particularly true if passive data is being collected. You also need to think about what uses have the participants consented to. Say, for example, have they consented to their data being transmitted across international borders? And you also need to think about data that is being collected about third parties and whether their consent has been obtained. For example, if people are collecting pictures or videos of other people, and pictures of faces do count as personal data, we need to know if these third parties have consented to taking part in the research or have their faces been obscured. In addition to informed consent, 2 other concerns around mobile research relate to cost and to safety. In some markets, mobile research might cause the participant to incur costs, and this needs to be addressed, and they need to be compensated for any costs that have come their way as a part of taking part in the research. In terms of safety, care needs to be taken that participants do not put themselves at risk. Some examples of the sort of risks that may arise include people taking part in surveys while driving or operating machinery. This shouldn't happen. We need to take care if people are being asked to take part in an activity while they're walking. Pictures shouldn't be taken in places where photography isn't allowed. And photographs and videos shouldn't be taken of subjects that are inappropriate, for example, other people's children. And it's also important to think about whether sensitive information can be vulnerable. Now, this can be either through non-secure communication processes or through allowing inappropriate access to a participant's device. So I've just briefly taken you through some of the themes and questions that are in the draft mobile chapter. As I mentioned earlier, this chapter is now available as a download from the new MR site. We'll be tweeting the link to make it easy for you to access those. And we would be delighted to have your feedback on this chapter. If you've downloaded the chapter, there are details there of how you can provide feedback, an email address and some other information. And whilst we're very specifically asking you for feedback on the mobile chapter, we are very, very keen that the Answers to Contemporary Research Questions book maintains its up-to-dateness. So if there's any other chapters in that book that you think I would like some additional clarification around this point, I think something might have changed, or I have a brand new question that I would like you to add to this chapter, please let us know and we will do whatever we can to include updates to other chapters as well. So I'd like to thank you very much for joining me today, and I'd like to encourage you to ask any questions that you have now.